Hey guys, it's me, Danny. Now, in my 20s, I thought I knew everything. Couldn't tell me nothing. Then I hit my 30s and I didn't think I knew anything. I wished somebody would have told me something. But now that I'm living in my 40s, I'm real comfortable living this life in the Middle Ages. So I thought I'd get together with a couple of my friends who also are in that same age bracket so that we can have some talks about what I believe are some shared experiences. Now, either you've gone through them, you will go through them, or you know somebody who went through them. It's all about conversation. It's all about community here. So listen. Comment down below if you have anything to say. If you don't, just make sure you subscribe so you know we here every week. Like it if you really just like what's going on, and share it with a friend if you know somebody who could benefit from what's going on. So let's sit back and see what the people have to say.
My name is Keesha, and I am 50 years old.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It feels good being 50.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
What about it do you say? Because you're like what, like a weekend, 2 weeks in?
I'm like 2 weeks in. It's liberating. I mean, at this point, you are grown, like you're real grown,
Yeah.
and and it's almost like, who gonna check me? I'm gonna do what I do, I'm gonna be what I'm gonna be, and I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. And I have lived the years to be able to do it. And so it's just liberating. Like I often wondered what it would feel like being 50, because at like 10 and 12, 15, 16 years old, you think that 50 is like aged and decrepit, but I feel younger than ever,
That's good. Were you nervous at 40 when it started to approach? Did you feel like, oh no, 50 or?
I did. So when I turned 40, it was a very weird time. Like, I had a 40th birthday party, but after the party, I just like kind of went home and cried. I felt like I hadn't reached the milestones that I wanted to reach. And I felt like, oh God, I'm getting older and older. And, the end is near. But as you kind of grow through your 40s, you learn that the end is not near. You know what I mean? You're really just beginning to live. So 40 was a difficult, like going over into that 40 range was difficult. But as I grew into my 40s and got closer to my 50, it was that realization that I'm still alive and I still got a lot more living to do. So,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
that's cool. And what's really cool is like at 50, I don't know 50, but what I do know is 50 is even the middle of the Middle Ages, because it's 40, 60. So it's like this space. I tend to look at it now as a space where you're already in it, so you kind of know, and you can mentor people in their 40s, but you also get to see like that next stage, and it's not so scary. I feel like once you hit 50, 60 isn't scary, because
Right.
I'm 45, and I feel like 60 is like fly. Like that's when you like you can be unapologetically fly and not really. I feel like people in their 60s do not care what people think about like their style and everything like that.
Not in the least. Not in the least.
Yes.
I think Sheree said something like, on the Real Housewives, I was watching, somebody was calling her old, and she was like, cold and old, honey, cold and old.
I like that. I did not see that, but I like that. I haven't kept up this last season at all.
Girl, it's been a mess, but that was one of the best lines, and I've been saying that, cold and old. You wish you could look like this at 50,
Absolutely. Now you've been on a journey with you have a page on social media, that's the Fat Girl Chronicles.
Yeah.
Very interesting, the journey. And it's always, for me, I felt like from the time that I noticed that you started it, it's always been learning and growth,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
realness in it. Do you feel like when you started to approach a 50 that you were less maybe timid about what you put on there
I
on your
think
face?
when I started the Fat Girl Chronicles, I think it was about 42 or 43. I can't even remember. It's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as I approached 50, I started feeling differently about it. Like I started feeling that Fat Girl Chronicles wasn't where I needed to be at this age.
Okay.
And so I don't post on it as much. I did change the name to Curvy Girl Adventures.
Okay.
Um, and I think that at this point, it's not even so much about this weight loss journey because I'm still in this whole weight loss journey, but it's about how I can be healthy from the inside out. Because
Mm-hmm.
now it's more about making sure that I'm living my best life in a healthy way from this point on, and healing my body at a cellular level. So I'm more going towards a more plant-based diet. I can't
Oh,
say that
okay.
I'm 100% vegan because I'm not. I don't know if I'll ever be 100% vegan, but I
Okay.
do more plant-based choices, and I do more, herbs and things like that. So I've been um, kind of dealing with, using mushrooms. So I use a lot of oyster mushrooms to do because it
Okay.
does have like that meat consistency.
That's what
So,
like it is. Which meat is it?
so I feel like it could be whatever you really want it to be, but to me, it's closer to chicken.
Okay.
So like I've done, and I think that I'm gonna start kind of posting some of the experiments that I do on some of these recipes. But I've done like a buffalo chicken uh, bite with the
Okay.
oyster mushrooms, and it was really, really good. And I've done um, a General So's stir fry, which was really
Okay.
good. And I've been doing more tofu, really just trying to eliminate as much meat out of my diet as possible. But there are times, when I still want some fried chicken, and there are times when I can't really do hamburger too much, that ground beef, because it messes with my stomach. But um, I really have been doing that to heal from a cellular level because 90% of what we carry in the middle when our in our stomach and things like that is waste. So I've been doing some cleanses. I did a watermelon cleanse, which was really good. And I did this papaya cleanse, which was the papaya cleanse juice was very terrible, but it really was powerful and worked within my system and really cleaned my system out.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I am. So I'm not at that Fat Girl Chronicle stage, where it was, I started it was kind of cheeky, like to kind of get people to come in and this is what I'm doing and I'm posting this exercise and things like that. I'm not at that stage anymore, in my life. And I'm not saying that I would never post exercises and things that I do, but I don't think I'm at that stage where I want to invite everybody in all the time.
Yes,
you know.
I get it. I
Uh-huh.
definitely invited a lot of people into my weight loss journey, and people are not so kind sometimes.
Right.
And sometimes the judgment, sometimes I question it, but you know me, like I really honestly can't even help trying to do things because I'm really not trying to show off for myself, but just to kind of want to inspire people. Because I just feel like if I could do something, you really could do something.
Right. And that's how I felt about Fat Girl Chronicles. Like, just because you are a certain size doesn't mean that you have to stay that certain size. And also, plus size doesn't mean unhealthy,
Right. Or
you know,
unhappy.
or unhappy. And
Oh,
I feel like I wanted to show Fat Girl Chronicles and that fact that I have a husband who supports me. I still struggle in this weight loss thing, but I'm just not there anymore because I don't feel like I'm struggling. I feel like I'm on a different journey. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm not sad about it. I am unapologetically who I am. You know, I just went to Jamaica to begin my birthday celebration and my belly was out, you
Yes,
know,
it was. You was in your bathing suit.
honey, in my bathing suit, enjoying my life. And who gonna say something to me, you know? And so I did begin that journey to want to help people, but everybody can't be helped, you
Yes.
know? And people always have an opinion on how you should be doing something when they are not doing it themselves,
Yes,
you
that's
know?
where I'm at. Like, yeah, like you're making comments about the way that I do things, but I don't see you doing things. So,
Right.
I really have learned now to just let go of what people say, because
Hmm.
most of the people who speak are the people who aren't doing anything anyway.
Right. Right. And got the most to say.
Always,
Got
always.
the most to say.
I want to touch real quick on the fact that these oyster mushrooms. I've seen a lot of people doing them, so I wanted to. I've been thinking about trying them, but I kind of feel like you got an advantage because you're a caterer, or I know that you were at one point catering, and so the food is probably better over there. It's probably better over there, so. I might be like, one time, can I just pay for a dish so I can or something?
I got you. I got you. I'm not even gonna make you pay for it. I'm just not gonna do that. But yeah, it's my daughter, actually my youngest daughter, Kirsten, she's really been helping me on this journey. And it was her who kind of sat me down and was like, this what you're doing, you're gonna, eat yourself into an early grave,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that at this age too, I'm ready to hear from my children,
Yeah.
and learn from them as well,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to see how I have raised them to be women of integrity, women who have an opinion, and women who really care about themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so she's been really helpful to me on this particular journey, and she's been really, really encouraging towards me. And
Yeah.
she had moved back home for a while because all your grown kids come back, and that.
Yeah, they done showed up.
So she was home for a while, and we really started, like, she started me on this journey, and I feel so much better. You know what I mean? I feel lighter. I think I've lost about 20, 25 pounds,
Hey,
but I'm not even concerned about that. I'm concerned about how I feel. I'm
I'm gonna
concerned
say
about how my
feel
joints feel in
better.
the morning when I
Yeah,
wake up.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, because that scale will definitely mislead you.
Yeah.
Even in my journey, like you want to get on that scale and see numbers, and a lot of times you don't see numbers change, but your clothes fit
Hmm.
differently, or your, like you said, the joints don't feel as bad, and that's
Right.
the true market. And we get so caught up on trying to tell like the number, that or
Hmm.
looking for the number, but your body start feeling different before the number really changes that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel now? 20 pounds
Uh,
is a big difference though in the feeling of your body.
yeah. I feel good, and I also feel creative again in the kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, you mentioned me doing catering, and I had stopped catering because my anxiety just could not take it. You know what I mean? Like, I just couldn't, the me worried about how the food tastes, and worried about if they're going to like it, and if they don't, what if they don't come back again if I don't have repeat customers, and it just affected the way that I cooked. And then also, what people were wanting, which is the classic soul food stuff,
Mhm.
just kind of stifled my creation in a way. But
Yeah.
now that I'm in this plant-based thing, it has opened up my food creativity again.
Mhm.
And so, I definitely encourage you to try those oyster mushrooms. And then they
Mhm.
have all other sorts of mushrooms that are meat. Like, there's another mushroom that is like a beef, like gives you a beef feel. I can't
Okay.
remember the name of it right now, but I mean, it's expensive. So
I'm sure. I was looking at Whole Foods about a week ago, and I was just like overwhelmed with how many different mushrooms
Yeah,
they had to offer. So I was like, let me just back myself back up. But
yeah,
kind of been looking at it.
yeah. Start with the oyster mushrooms and
Okay.
then go from there.
Now, um, this brings us kind of to our conversation for tonight because I feel like I remember a post on social media where you were commenting on somebody else and saying that you felt like kind of your creativity and your catering was also halted because of your losing your father.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of let's see if we can talk about that. I want to just give you the space to first just like introduce us to your dad and your
Hmm.
relationship with him.
So my dad, Kenneth Mitchell, um, our relationship is, and I say is because at times I still feel like our relationship is evolving, even
Mm-hmm.
though he's no longer here. But our relationship has had many ups, many downs, many ins, and many outs. Him and my mother were never married,
Okay.
though they were each other's true love. You
Okay.
know, towards the end of his life, he told me a lot of stories about him and my mother. And what I've come to realize is that he never stopped loving her and she never stopped loving him, but they didn't know how to love each other at the different intervals of their life. And so when my mom went away to college and my dad stayed home, went to the army, they both became different people, but they were still, when they came back together, they still wanted to have the people that were in high school, and they weren't that anymore. And so, through the different iterations of their relationship, they've never learned how to love each other through each level. And so, it caused them to really just be apart. Um, so, when I was born in 1972, you know, he wasn't at the hospital when I was born. He wasn't there. I think at the time he had moved to Connecticut, and my brother was born in March, and I was born in September.
Okay.
So, you know, and there was that my grand though his my grandmother and my grandfather, his father and mother, were at the hospital. And they were there when I was born. They were there when I came out. You know, they visited. You know, and I had a relationship with them. And they pushed him to have a relationship with me. Now, when I got to, I guess about 5 or 6, that's when we really started kind of getting in touch with each other. And, you know, he came to visit and things like that. And um, my dad was a complicated person. You know, he had a complicated relationship with his father, which then made him have a complicated relationship with all of his children.
Mhm.
And even though he married my youngest brother's mother, they weren't married for long, but even though he lived with him, they still had a complicated relationship, you know. Um, I think that my dad definitely was in that generation where fathers didn't say that they loved you, or they didn't give room or space to feel any
Mhm.
emotion, but to be strong, you know, and don't cry and all that type of stuff. So my father was really kind of raised in that type of environment, and his father did not come through for him in so many different ways. So I feel that my dad was always kind of going through this phase of really trying to be better, but not really having an example of what better is. You know,
Mhm.
he often told me that he really looked at my grandfather on my mom's side, my mom's father, as a father figure to him, you know, and even when my mom was away at college, he would still come to my grandparents' house and just kind of be around the family and things like that. Um, but I had the most in common with my dad. You know, my dad was a professional singer. He used to sell out Civic Arena when it was a Civic Arena. Him and his doo-wop group, you know, was the big thing, you know. Then he went on to be with Johnny Angel and the Halos, and he went on to do, I forget the name of the group right now, but he got awards from the Temptations and things like that. So he was a definite singer, and you know, I always wished that we would have connected more on that level in my formative years as I was growing up and, coming into my own of singing and music and things like that.
Okay.
You know, but when I got to be old enough, I think I was probably about 10. We started seeing each other pretty regularly, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And he would come over to the houses. We lived in Manchester and he lived around the corner. So he would come to the house and he would take me places, and we would do things together. He would buy me stuff, and kind of that's what he he became, was the guy that bought me a whole bunch of stuff, because I feel that part of it was his guilt. And at 10, 11, 12, you're using that to get what you want, right? um and so our relationship grew from that. Then when we got into my teenage years, when you're a teenager, you don't like anybody. But I remember my mom just being so strict all the time, because we were Church of God in Christ. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, and I wanted to go.
I had that strict for real.
Oh, real strict, girl, real strict. I had to sneak out to so many concerts. And I just remember thinking, like, why can't I just go to my dad's for the summer so that I could at least have a summer of freedom,
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we went through our battles and in my teenage years, and we still stayed in touch. The one thing about my dad, though, he never missed any milestones in my life, never. So when I graduated from 5th grade into the 6th grade, he was there. From kindergarten to the 1st grade, he was there. From high school, whatever I did, singing here, competitions, he always made sure that he was there. And as I got older, he started, we would talk more, and he would talk about things that went on with his dad. He would talk about why he becomes distant at times, and he dealt with depression. And his generation didn't see therapists. You just kind of dealt with it in whatever way you felt that you needed to deal with it. And my dad's way of dealing with depression was just to retreat, which is something that he passed down to me. When I was feeling some type of way, I would retreat, I would talk and things like that. So getting to know him on that level in my teenage years helped me, because I understood his capacity, and then we would talk more. And then when I went away to college, I did an internship at the sheriff's office, as my major was public administration.
Okay.
And I was doing my internship round at family court. So my mom, I had wanted something from my mom, and she was like, I can't get it. Ask your father. And so when I asked my father, he said, I don't feel like you need that. So, at 18, I wanted what I wanted. And so I sued him for child support.
That was a bold move.
Sued him for child
Yeah,
support.
I see how the process works. We might as well go head on through it.
Oh yeah, and I did it. And he was so mad at me. He was so mad at me. I will never forget that. And he was like, he said to me, I'm not even mad. Like, I'm just hurt that you would do that. And I remember in my 18, 19-year-old thing, like, I don't know why you're hurt. That whole thing.
Like, I
But
wanted my stuff.
right, I wanted my stuff, And he ended up having to pay the child support. And then, I got what I wanted at the time, but then I just kind of really, really felt bad. Then when I graduated from, or when I left college, and I got married, that's when our relationship became really, really close. I got married when I was 21.
Okay.
Um, and I just needed my dad because, my husband was 9 years older than me, and I wasn't quite sure what I was getting myself into. He had children from a previous marriage, and I remember my dad saying, like, I don't want this for you, but if this is what you really want, I'm going to support you, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And he did, and he walked me down the aisle, and I have that memory of him. Now he did have to leave at the reception because he had a gig, because nothing was going to stop him from his gigs, okay, and that coin. But we talked a lot. We were close. Talked almost every day at that point, and he helped me through a lot of things. He affirmed me more in my, adult years than I've ever been affirmed from him throughout my, formative years. And then he would say things like, you only marry Art because he looks like me. And, and on, and on Valentine's Day, he would call me like at like dark 30 in the morning so that he could be the first person before Art to wish me a happy Valentine's Day. And he was say things because I'm your first love, and I would be like, yes, Dad, you're my first love. And birthdays and things like that. And so when it came time for me to be the caretaker for him, it was an easy transition, to do that,
Yeah.
because I felt that even when he wasn't around as much when I was younger, I realized that he cared for me from the capacity that he was able to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated it,
Yeah.
and it might not have been as much as I wanted to, but being a parent and looking back at it and really understanding sometimes your capacity as a parent, I understand, you know what I mean, where
Yeah.
he was. And he's apologized to me for it so many times, like just so many times. And I've forgiven him for that. And I really, really let it go, because I just wanted my dad at the end of the day.
Right.
And we talked a lot. That last year of his life, we were together almost every single day, because I was taking him to doctor's appointments and things like that, making sure that the house was clean, and just being that caretaker. um, and we talked almost every day, and we talked about a lot of things, and he let me in on a lot of things about his relationship with my mother, and our relationship, and his relationship with um, his father. And I understood him even the more, which made me miss him even the more when he died. I just wasn't ready for him to go, because I felt like we were just kind of getting to this spot where I was older, like I was, really, really grown. And I was getting to know him on a different level, because he was really letting me in on some things that I never thought I would be let in on. Um, and he was a proud person. My dad, he was very good looking, and he told everybody that he was very good looking, and he did not mince words about that. I can remember one time asking him for a poster of Billy D. Williams, and he was like, "You don't need a poster of Billy D. Williams. Just take a picture of me." You know.
Yes, Dad.
He
For
was the dark
what? I'm
skin.
standing right here.
Right. He was a dark skinned dude with the hazel eyes, and he had this beautiful singing voice. And women it just was ridiculous how they would act when he was around. And it was ridiculous. And I would go see him singing at different places, like when he was singing with Johnny Angel and the Halos. Honey, white women would be throwing draws at the stage, okay? And they just loved him. They just just loved him, and watching him perform really was like one of my greatest joys. And I kind of see, where I get things from and why I do certain things, because, he did it, and he was not always the easiest person to get along with at times. He saved money and he made sure that my brother and my sister and I, we were set up, and that we didn't have to want for anything. We didn't have to come out of pocket for his funeral at all. He had everything written out of how he wanted it to go. He left us, money and things like that so that we would be taken care of. Um, and he just was a secret planner, like, things that you wouldn't know. I would ask my dad for money all the time, and he always say he doesn't have any money, how broke he was. And then, when he passed and we went to the bank, because he left it in my brother's name, and we found out how much was in there, me and my brother just cracked up, and we was like, this Negro was always broke. And this is why, because he always kind of knew what was happening in the future. He wanted to be cremated. He didn't, want, a lot of fanfare and stuff like that, even though I did give him a lot of fanfare at his funeral, because, he deserved it. And that's who I am. So, and people loved him. People really, really loved my dad. And he was different in different settings. And so he was just really just kind of everything to me. And I sometimes often kind of envy people who had their dad in their homes and things like that. But what I did have of my dad was very precious. And it meant a lot to me. He didn't live with me, and I didn't live with him. And I asked him one time, why didn't you just like come and get me for the summers? Like, I could have just stayed with you for the summers. And he was just like, I just didn't think about it, because I was always around, and so I never thought about just taking you for the summer, because I was always around. And I understood that, but I told him that if you would have, I wouldn't have had to sneak out to the New Edition concert, and wouldn't have had to sneak out to Ready for the World concert. Like, I had to sneak out to all of these concerts, and I got caught every single time. Okay.
But I wasn't good at it, but I was still going to do it.
I was still going, because I couldn't understand at like 15, 16 why I couldn't go to the Any Heartbreak tour, So, those, I loved my dad. I loved him dearly, and I appreciated him, and I appreciated the things that he gave me, the things that he instilled in me emotionally. Um, he just, some things he just didn't even know that he was doing to make my heart grow. And he just, he just naturally did it. And I was his favorite daughter. And he said it out loud. So it's not anything that it's not anything that I think. It's a fact. He said I was his favorite daughter. And yeah, that's my dad. I feel like I didn't give you, I don't know if I gave you what you wanted, but
no, I'm not. I'm honestly not looking for anything. I'm just trying to give space for people, so that we could just kind of open up conversations. I'm just trying to open up conversations with other people within our age group. I like conversations. I like topics about things. So I'm not looking for particularly anything. You just don't know people, and like I know for myself, my parents were married till I was 15. We lived in the same house, but I didn't grow up with my parents. And so when most of my friends before I turned 30, either didn't have any relationship with their dad or had unhealthy relationships with their dads. And I kind of hit 40, and it's like more people that I know had healthier relationships with their fathers. And I'm always kind of like, I don't identify, but I really like to hear about it. I really like to hear about it because there's always, there's a lot of conversation about absentee fathers and, fathers not being there and abusive fathers and toxic parenting and that type of thing. But I don't typically hear a lot of Black women speaking about their relationships, healthy relationships with their dads.
You don't, and I feel like though there are more Black women. I think so. Let me say this. I think sometimes Black women our age don't have the healthiest relationship with their father because their father maybe didn't have the healthiest relationship with their father. Because they just went through that weird, time period when Black people couldn't be vulnerable in any spaces. They just couldn't be vulnerable in any spaces. And so it didn't allow them to be vulnerable in their home. And one thing my dad said about his father is that his father would always come through with, if he needed money or something like that, he would do that. They would have to go get it, but he would come through with it, but he just wasn't present all the time. And my grandfather dealt with, several things. And I don't know everything because, my dad didn't talk about him a lot because I feel like it was just a lot of hurt feelings there, and a lot of things that just emotions that weren't really dealt with. So he didn't talk about him much. Now, my grandmother, his mother, remarried, and the only granddad that I really knew was my step grandfather, which I didn't know was my step grandfather until I was in college, and my mother said, "Your grandfather died." And I'm thinking like, oh my God. And she's like, no, not, your grandfather, Dave, your granddad, I can't even remember his name. And so I was like, what?
The other guy.
She was like, the other guy. I was like, what? And so, she explained to me who he was. And, she told me some stories and things like that. And I remember coming home from school for the funeral. And I remember waiting in the church, and I didn't come in with the family because I was already in there, and I remember thinking like, am I supposed to come in with the family? I just remember being so unsure of what to do. Jack was his name. Jack, thank you. I just remember being so unsure of what to do, you know what I mean? And I watched my dad come in, and he was so upset. He was crying. I'd never seen my dad cry before. And, and I wanted to go to him, but I couldn't because his current wife, it was just weird. And I remember feeling so distant from him at that point. And I remember just leaving the funeral. I called my mom and I told her to come and get me before the funeral was over. And, my dad called later and was like, why did you leave? I didn't even get a chance to see you. Your grandmother told me that you were there and you left. And I was like, I just didn't feel like I had a place there. I just really didn't feel like I had a place there. And, I remember him just kind of talking about the fact that he hated that. Like, he hated the fact that I felt like I didn't have a place there. And one thing he said to me kind of stuck with me all the time, no matter what situation we went through. And he was like, you always have a place with me. You always have a place with me. And
that's nice.
Yeah, it just
that's a nice thing to get in general, but to be a Black girl and get that father, and that was, you said you were in college, so between 18 and 21.
Yeah, I think I was about 19.
Yeah, that's a definite gift to get. Was your father not into church at all, or just not as strict as your mother?
So my dad was into church, but not in a organized religion, and definitely not as strict as my mom. And he just felt like, you got to let your child be a child and a teenager experience teenage things. And so I know they definitely didn't agree on that. And that was probably part of the reason why my mother didn't let me go over there for the summers, because that my dad's side of the family, that's turn up. Okay.
Yeah.
Those family reunions are the turn up. Okay.
Yeah, you
And
don't need that much devil. You don't need that much.
right, I don't need that much devil, but it was
All
fun.
summer, no.
A whole entire summer, boy, I have to,
Yeah.
douse you with anointing oil if you come back in the fall.
Yeah.
Um, but and then my mom's side of the family, is very churched and all of that. We have a good time, but they were very, very churched. So I feel like if I was with him, it would have given me balance, a greater balance, kind of growing up and
Okay.
into my adult years. But I really feel like it was my mom who was just like, no, 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 you know.
Being a mom, sometimes you think you're doing it right,
Yeah.
and then you don't know until they're adults and they can express
Yeah.
better, like, this thing that I needed, you didn't give to me. And being a child, and we're all children, so being a child, there comes that point when you want to tell your parents, like, the things that you gave me, or I like that it wasn't enough, or and then being a parent, and we're at that age now where our kids are able to start saying those things to us, and you're like, I thought I was doing a thing, and now I realize, like, maybe I missed something, or I was too much of something. It
Mhm.
You just never know what you should do, but
Yeah.
you will find out that you did something wrong.
Oh
You did
yeah.
something wrong.
Oh yeah. Oh
You will
yeah.
find that out for sure. So after the service for your father, how do you feel like you carried? Like, was it a surreal type of situation, or what? Do you feel like there's been a point now where you've come to terms with the fact that he's not here physically?
So I feel like the service was a surreal situation, because my older sister is very emotional. And I remember my dad saying, do not let your sister act up at my funeral. I do not want her crying and falling out over the casket and stuff. And so I was so focused on making sure that she didn't do that, and making sure that it was a dignified and respectable funeral, because, that side of my family is very emotional at times. And I think that I didn't allow myself to feel. And I was kind of in robot motion, like making sure that, because he was a fireman. So making sure that the firemen were where they were supposed to be, going through that long processional line of all the firemen coming up and saluting him, and, making sure that he had, that each singing group that he was with was on the program, making sure, so it was like I just didn't think and I didn't feel I was in a doing mode. So it was definitely surreal. So when the funeral was over and I got home, it all just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks,
Okay.
and it just all, came down on me at one time. And I just wasn't ready for that. And I just broke down and I cried and I cried. I think I cried for maybe about 45 minutes to an hour, or
Okay.
maybe 2 hours, until I cried myself to sleep. And I woke up the next morning with the realization that he is just not here, and I felt like an orphan, even though my mother, is still alive and kicking. I just felt like an orphan. and I felt like a piece of me was gone. And I wish that I would have allowed myself to feel more at the funeral as opposed to waiting until it was all over. Because it was almost an overwhelming sense of grief. And
Mm-hmm.
then, the grief goes in waves. You're okay, and then you're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was definitely on autopilot during the service.
Do you feel like now, how long has it been?
It's been a little over a year.
Okay. And so do you feel like now you have reached a space mentally where um I don't want to just sound disrespectful. Do you feel like you reach a space mentally where you realize like it's like you're not alone and he's still with you in a different way, or are you still in a spot where you're feeling like orphaned?
So I feel like I'm in a spot where I'm not alone because I had a couple months after, or it was a couple months after the funeral, I was asleep, and I woke up, but I was still in a sleep state, but I knew that I was awake, and it was like I was having a vision. And so he came to me and he said, "I'm proud of you,
Mm,
and you did a great job, and I love you, and I need you. I need your mind to rest."
mm,
And he said that, I'm around, I'm around.
mm,
And then he disappeared, and so at that moment I had a sense of peace that I wasn't orphaned, and that he was still with me in some capacity. And I felt better, I felt a lot better. I still miss him incredibly because I still go to call him at certain things happen. And then I realize that I can't call him.
mm.
Um, and so I don't feel orphaned anymore. I miss him, but I do feel his presence, through my children, through certain things, sometimes through my brothers.
Mm.
Um, and I just kind of feel his spirit around me.
Nice.
Mm.
Do you feel like because almost around the same time you were an empty nester, do you feel like um it enhanced, you were given a space to enhance your relationship with your husband?
Yeah,
So what
I,
you said about your dad, and how you guys related, did it help you, with relating with?
it did. Like, when you become an empty nester, you get to know your husband on a different level because, while the kids are home, everything is about the kids, right? Getting them to cheerleading practice, getting them to this, and making sure you have money for that. And, somebody needs braces, somebody needs to go to the doctor, somebody's fighting. So, so everything becomes about the children, getting them through high school, getting them through the prom and all of that type of stuff. And you operate in a way that you still have this loving relationship, but the crux of all of your conversations are the kids.
Mhm.
So once we became empty nesters, we had to get to know each other on a different level. And it was it was a process, because I don't have to cook every single day, and I'm not going to be cooking every single day.
Yes,
you know and
yes.
he's looking at me like, "Are you cooking?" No. So it's those things that you have to kind of get to know each other on a different level. And it brought us closer together, and then only for them to come back home.
That has been a running topic through all my conversations. Like
Uh-huh.
they hear and then you get sad because they can ready to leave, and then they leave and then you start feeling comfortable, like I like this, and then as soon as you feel like the comfort, they be like, hey.
Right.
I
Can
need
I
to come
come
back
back
over
home?
there.
Right.
Yeah, and then there's a whole different way to relate to them when they come back, and it's a whole different dynamic, 100%.
What?
Um,
Right. Because they're grown,
yeah,
so.
yeah, and you're different now, so
Yeah.
yeah, it changes things. When touch back real quick, you said that you learned that your father would kind of retreat in his depressive states, and then that's how you learned how to handle yours. When your father passed, was there a retreat at that point that you had to get pulled out of, or do you feel like you learned along the years how to not retreat so much?
No, I feel like it was definitely a retreat that I had to get pulled out of. And I had to start after he died. That's when I started seeing a therapist because, my every thought was about him and reliving things and wanting to do things differently. And if I would have did this, and so I retreated a lot. I backed away from activities that I was doing before he passed away. And I backed away from people because I just felt like nobody wants to talk to me because I'm always sad and I don't want to, give my sadness to other people. I kind of backed away from my husband because, I didn't want him to have to bear the burden of trying to get me together and, all of that type of stuff. And so I definitely had to be pulled out of that depression, and it took a minute for it to happen, but I was happy that I had the wherewithal to seek out therapy, to kind of help me because I knew that I needed some help. I was retreating very far back and
Mhm.
into a really deep dark place, and I knew I needed help, and so the therapy really really helped to pull me out of that dark place.
And that's another thing. I just really love hearing Black people talk about going to therapy now. And because one of the things that a lot of times that I have conversations with, which I loved about hearing you talk about your dad, was, you know, helping people to see their parents as actual people.
Yeah.
And then realizing that if I can see my parent as actual people and saying like, okay, so there were some things that didn't involve me in their lives, okay.
Right.
And then because I think a lot of times when we're the child, a lot of people have hard time realizing that their parents are actual people who had trials that had nothing to do with them, even though sometimes they took it out on us in different ways. Then you realize that you probably should, get some help for some things you have going on.
Right.
And then that makes you a better person yourself, for yourself, not for anybody else, but everybody gets the residuals from that. But being able to say in this day and age that I knew that I needed help and that I went to get help, for me it just sounds like so much strength in people. And so like I feel like I would just want to say like I commend you for knowing it and then addressing it and being in a space where you were willing to talk about it.
Yeah. I have to tell you, and then it was great to go to a therapist that looked like me too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Okay.
Um, but when I started going there, even though I knew I needed the help, I was still kind of resistant. I don't want to say resistant. I still was kind of giving her that church fakeness. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I'm grateful that I had a therapist that was like, girl, like you're only lying to yourself right now, right? That didn't let me retreat into that whole fake church thing where I know, how you doing, blessed, God is, and then meanwhile, my heart is on the floor
Yes.
bleeding, but I'm not going to let you know that because you don't need to know that. But and she was a therapist. I was just like, girl, you're only lying to yourself. I know you're not okay. So
Mhm.
when you going to say you're not okay and understand that it's okay not to be okay, and that's why you're here to get to a place called okay. So I I appreciated that. Even though I knew I needed the help, I still didn't fall into the help until, you know, she was like, I mean, we can sit here and do these niceties all day, or, we can get to the nitty gritty and you can feel better. You
Right.
choose.
Because did you realize that, like, after leaving, like after a session of doing the niceties and then getting back in your car, did you feel like I'm not getting anything from this? Or did you feel like because we have that church thing going on, did you kind of feel like I guess this is just what it's supposed to feel like?
Right. I was like, all right, got that done and over with. I felt like, I said I needed help. I'm at the place where I could get help. And I remember the one therapy session, and she was asking me, well, how do you feel? And I was like, I feel sad, but I'm, leaning and depending on the Lord, and He's going to see me through. And she was like, okay, yeah, that's true. He will. But how long are we going to do this? And I was like, do what? She was like, how long are you going to fake your way through this? Because you're paying money to come and see me and you're faking your way through it. And I was like, damn,
Yeah.
you just called me out.
Yeah.
You just
That's
really, really
that's
called
the
me
thing
out.
you need. Yeah.
Yeah, and I needed it. And I remember like going home, being pissed on the ride home. Who she thinks she is? I'm paying her. Blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And then when I came back, I was like, you're right. I have been just kind of going through the motions. And that's when the real healing started. And it's still a process because I'm still
Yeah.
healing. You
Yeah.
know, um, there's some deep disappointments, that I had from my dad. And I
Mhm.
don't want to make it seem like, it was all roses in our relationship because it wasn't. There were some deep disappointments. There were some deep things that I felt like he didn't come through for me when he should have. Um, and therapy has helped me deal with all of those things. So,
Listen, anybody who felt like filing for child support for themselves definitely felt like, and I don't care, which would come from a space, especially at that age, where there would, be some kind of ill feelings as well.
yeah,
You
yeah. I remember that. I remember just filing for child support. And I remember the lady was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I was like, "Yep." You know, she was like, "All right,
Sure do, and I feel good about it.
feel good about it," and and I did it. Yeah. So, but yeah,
Yeah, but even when we speak about relationships, like romantic relationships, there's always the conversation about, if you've been with somebody for a certain amount of time, it takes at least half that amount of time to come to terms with the breakup and the ending of that relationship. So I would imagine that losing a parent, it's not, you definitely can't have an instant healing, and it's not healthy for you to or for anyone to say, I'm good, it's been a year, I'm good, because I feel like that first year you still come to terms with all that happened just in that last year.
you are. And if anybody says that they're good after their parent died, they are a lie, and the truth is not in them. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what type of relationship you have with your parent, if it's a good or a bad relationship, it's still losing your parent. And then if you had a bad relationship, it's losing the fact that you can never rectify that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and it it's just, the first couple months, I just still couldn't believe that he was gone. And I kept going over in my mind, should I have done this? Should I have done that? What if I had taken him to this doctor's appointment? Maybe we should have got a second opinion. That was all what the first couple months was really about for me. And then, so I would say probably he died in April. And so from like April to July, was that. And then, July to still to this day, I've come to the fact that I did all that I could possibly do as a
Mhm.
caregiver.
Mhm.
And I'm coming to grips with the fact that he is no longer here physically, but he's here in another realm. You know what I mean? Like his spirit is still around. Now here's a funny thing. So when my brother, so I have two brothers. One was from Pittsburgh and the other one lives in Alabama. And now my younger brother, he lives in California. But I said in September of last year, I was like, we should have a house party since we didn't all live together and we never like had a could sneak and have a house party and get in trouble. We
Yeah.
should do a house party, And so they were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So we had this house party. And we were, everybody was in the room, and my brothers, they're, good looking people. So there was all these girls there, and it kind of in and out of my dad's room. My dad's door to his bedroom shut out of nowhere and locked.
What?
Okay. It never you have to lock the door from the inside. That's the first thing.
Okay.
And the second thing is like, who shut this door? And we could not get that door open until
Oh my
everybody left.
goodness. He said, I just want y'all to know that I see what y'all doing.
That I see what y'all doing, and you're
I
in
see what
trouble.
y'all doing. And we'll talk about it when this party is over.
We could not get that door open. And my brother was like, I thought you locked it. I was like, no. And it was
Wow.
so funny. When the last person left, the door just opened.
Wow. That's so cool. I both my parents are still alive, but both of my parents mentally are not capable of communication.
Uh-huh.
And so I always imagine, like we've become like caregivers but not in a physical sense every day like you did.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I always want for people to know, and maybe you could say more about it, just like the family members who are the caregivers for the other people in the family. There is a sense that like it's easy to do this thing, and you kind of I feel like a lot of those family members kind of get misunderstood,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes like the family doesn't come together in the way. Did your family, were you all who were present participants in your father's last year, or was that more on you?
So I think my brother my brother who was living here at the time, my youngest brother, it definitely was both of us in
Mm-hmm.
it together. You know what I mean? Because my dad relied on the both of us to make decisions and things like that. So we were definitely in it together. But when it came to caretaking, like really taking care of my dad, making sure that he showered, taking him to get his hair cut, that was more me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my older sister came in later on. And, I would have to say that when it came down to, when it got to that point where I felt like my brother from Alabama needed to come in, and I called him and he came, we all were together in it. And that was one thing that my dad was really happy about, is that the four of us were all together with him at that last moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I feel that we all played a part in taking care of him, and we all we all did our part.
Okay.
I was the one who made all of the medical decisions and things like that, but we all had a part and played in taking care of him. So I feel like we equally shared that.
Well, this is really good, because I sometimes feel like, I get people who were caregivers just being like, I wasn't supported, I wasn't,
Hmm.
and so I feel like amen for the support as well.
But I want to say that he from the time that he got to the point where he needed caregiving all the time to the time that he died was very short. And I knew when he got to the point where he needed caregiving all the time that he was not going to stay, because my dad just was not with that. Like, he was not with the fact of me having to bathe him, me
Mhm.
having to change his diaper. Like, that's just it killed him on the
Yeah.
inside for me to have to do that. So
Yeah.
I knew at that moment when those things started happening that it was not long, that he wouldn't be here much longer, because he would rather not be here than for me to have to do that, or for my sister to have to do that, or for my brothers to have to do that. Like,
Mhm.
when my brother started having to carry him from the bed um to his wheelchair and things like that, I could tell in his eyes that he didn't like it. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like he couldn't do anything to change it. And so he had a DNR and all of that. He didn't want any extraordinary measures to keep him alive. So I knew that it was going to be a very short period of time that we were going to have to care for him. You know what I mean? And so I feel like we were able to support each other because it was a short period of time. I feel like had it maybe have been a longer period of time, I would have had that where I didn't feel supported and things like that. But, we found out he had cancer the year before. So, and he was around for a year. So I don't feel like we had a long enough period of time of caregiving to get to that particular point.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions, but is there anything that you would like just to put out there?
Um, I think that one thing that I really want to put out there is for fathers to know how important they are in their daughter's life.
Mhm.
You're definitely important in your son's life, but the importance in your daughter's life is, I can't even put it into words of how affirming words from your dad take you a long, long way and mean so much to you. So I would have to say, if you are part time in your child's life or not in their life as you should be, then you need to rethink that and really be a part of their life, because you don't want your daughter or your son, but especially your daughter, to get to the end of your life and say, I didn't even know my dad, or my dad never affirmed me, or my dad never made me feel any type of way, or he never talked to me and I just didn't know him. You just don't want that. One of my dad's biggest regrets is that he wasn't around when I was born, and that he took that to his grave of feeling guilty about that.
Mhm.
So I would just say, be there as much as possible, say all of the things that you need to say, and really affirm that relationship with your daughter. It's really, really important.
If you know me, you know that I love TV and music.
Uh-huh.
Um I ask everybody now, what song do you feel like represents you? It doesn't have to be the only song, but if you were just thinking right now and you needed to throw in something that would just represent who you are, what would that song be and why?
Um, so I
Any
think that
genre, any artist, whatever you feel.
there is one song. There's two songs actually, and
Okay.
the one song is by Jill Scott, and it's "Living My Life Like It's Golden."
Yes.
I feel like that is where I am right now. If that would be my theme song, and then another song by CC Winans, and it's just "All My Life You've Been Faithful," and God has been faithful all my life. I may not have always understood things. I may not have felt that He came through in certain ways that I wanted Him to come through, but there's never been a time where I didn't feel that God wasn't present in my life and that He didn't make ways out of no way. So I think that if I had to pick two songs, it would be those two songs.
Perfect.
All right, darling.
Thank you for
You're
giving
welcome.
me your time on a Friday night. I really appreciate it. And have a good evening. Tell Art I said hello.
I definitely will. All right, darling. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I would say that we have that thing in common with our fathers being in music. My dad wasn't in groups or anything, but he really had a great voice. And
Uh-huh.
growing up, just randomly my dad would like hit a note and be like, find your note, like to harmonize with him at any time. We did not have a good relationship, but music 100% was our connector. So anytime I hear people like, have these musical connections in family, I'm like, oh, I did that.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
had that. I had that. But yes, thank you for giving me and giving the audience your a glimpse at your dad and your relationship with him.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I
Good.
think that it was definitely therapy for me to talk about it.
Good. I
Uh-huh.
would like for it to be that kind of space. Thank you for listening to the Just Saying podcast. Don't forget to look for us on all the social media sites for updates. And remember that we will be here every single Wednesday, especially with this series we have going on right now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure your friends know about it because anytime sisters is helping sisters, it's a great thing. You've been listening to me, Danny, at the Just Saying podcast.